We never knew how cheap our lives had become until the day the sun rose red over the plains, casting long shadows that made even the mountains look like they were bowing in mourning. My name is Mara, and the story I'm about to tell is not only mine, but Ada's, Lila's, and the woman we lost that morning. In the Wild West, justice was often traded like cattle, and survival belonged to whoever held the gun, the badge, or the rope. And in our case, we belonged to neither. We were the taken, the forgotten, the ones captured by a band of outlaws who saw us not as people, but as property they could trade for a bounty placed on a rival gang. To them, we were currency, the reward, living proof they had completed a job. We were dragged across the desert for days, our dresses torn by thorns and our skin burned raw from the sun. They mocked us when we cried, silenced us when we begged, and laughed whenever one of us stumbled. They said we were lucky, because once they reached the designated place, once they handed us over, they'd walk away rich. They said the men paying for us didn't care whether we were alive, scared, or broken. They only wanted bodies that proved a message had been delivered. I remember the moment everything shifted. It was early dawn, and the outlaws had stopped near an old abandoned ranch to rest before the exchange. That was when Lila collapsed. She'd been bleeding from a gunshot wound one of them gave her when she tried to escape days earlier. The ground around her turned red, and her breathing was shallow. The outlaws didn't even look at her. "Let her die," their leader said. "Dead or alive, she counts." Those words will haunt me until the day I die. Ada tried to fight them, screaming that Lila needed water, but she was shoved aside like dust. I held Lila's hand and watched her eyes flutter, her voice barely a whisper as she said, "Please, don't let me die here." But fate, or maybe mercy, had other plans. That was when we saw him. A lone rider approaching from the horizon, tall, steady, and carrying an air of danger that seemed different from the cruel men around us. He rode a chestnut stallion, dust kicking behind him like a storm following his tail. The outlaws stiffened. Hands moved toward guns. The rider slowed his horse, lifted one hand as if greeting the morning, and the wind shifted as if it recognized him. We later learned his name was Elias Boone, though we didn't dare speak it until much later. He was a rancher, or at least that's what he looked like on first glance. But there was something in his eyes that didn't belong to a man who spent his life with cattle. Something old, something wounded, something dangerous. The outlaw leader barked at him to move along. He didn't. Instead, he slid off his horse, moved calmly toward Lila, and knelt beside her as though he had every right in the world to be there. "She's dying," he said. "You planning to do something about it?" The outlaws laughed. "Ain't none of your business, rancher." One spat. Elias didn't look up. He simply placed 2 fingers on Lila's throat and whispered, "Her pulse is fading." Something inside me broke, not because of fear, but because a stranger cared more about her than the men who claimed to own us. The outlaw leader finally stepped forward, gun drawn. "Move aside. She ain't worth a fight." That was when everything exploded into violence. Elias moved faster than a rattlesnake. One moment he was crouched beside Lila. The next he was behind the outlaw leader, twisting his arm and slamming him into the dirt. The others reached for their guns, but Elias was already firing. 2 shots, clean, precise. The dust rose like smoke. The horses screamed, and when it settled, only Elias was standing. He told us not to move. He approached Lila, checked her wound, and for the first time in days, hope stirred in me. "I can save her," he said quietly. "But you have to trust me." We had no reason to trust any man, yet there he was, offering kindness in a desert that had shown us none. He lifted Lila in his arms with a gentleness that made my throat tighten, and we followed him without question. Behind us, the bodies of the outlaws baked under the rising sun, proof that we were no longer the reward. Someone else had claimed us, but not for profit, for protection. And though we didn't know it yet, Elias Boone had just rewritten our fate. Before I continue, friends, if you want to, hear what happened next, how one rancher's courage tore apart a whole criminal network, and how our lives changed forever, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps keep stories like this alive. And trust me, Chapter 2 is where everything truly begins. Elias rode hard across the plains with Lila in his arms, while Ada and I clung to the sides of his horse, struggling to keep up. He led us to a small ranch tucked between 2 ridges, hidden from sight unless you already knew where it was. Every step of the journey, Lila drifted in and out of consciousness, her blood soaking through Elias's shirt. "Stay with me," he whispered to her each time, as if his voice alone could keep her alive. When we reached the ranch, an older woman rushed out, the kind whose presence made you feel safe the moment she looked at you. This was Clara Boone, Elias's aunt, a healer known across the territory for saving people the frontier tried to swallow. Clara didn't ask questions. She simply took Lila inside, wiped the sweat from Elias's face, and said, "You brought me another one, didn't you?" As Lila disappeared behind a wooden door, Elias finally turned to us. "No one will hurt you here," he said. "Not while I'm breathing." But peace in the West never lasted long. Not even an hour after Clara began treating Lila, riders appeared on the ridge, 6 of them, all carrying the mark of the dead outlaw's employer. Ada and I froze. Those men were worse than the ones who'd taken us. They didn't just buy women, they bought information. Land, lawmen, and fear itself. Elias stepped onto the porch, hand resting on his revolver. The men rode closer until their leader, a man with a silver tooth and eyes like a dead snake, spoke. "Boone, we hear you took something that belongs to us." Elias didn't flinch. "I took people, not things," Silvertooth smirked. "Alive or dead, they're the bounty. And the bounty's ours." The world held its breath. Clara appeared behind Elias, shotgun in hand. Ada grabbed my arm. I could feel her shaking. The men dismounted. Guns were drawn. For the second time that day, I thought I was going to die. But Elias spoke first. "You won't be taking them," he said calmly. "Not today, not ever." The air cracked. The fight was fast, loud, and brutal. Clara fired first, dropping the man closest to the porch. Elias dove for cover, taking out 2 more with shots so precise it looked impossible. I grabbed Ada and pulled her behind the water trough as bullets punched into the wood around us. One outlaw charged the house, only to be stopped by Elias tackling him to the ground. Dust and gunfire filled the air. Horses screamed. Someone shouted my name. And then silence. When the wind cleared the dust, every outlaw lay motionless. Elias stood in the center of them, chest heaving, blood dripping from a cut above his eye. He walked toward us slowly, making sure we were unharmed. Then he knelt, looking us in the eyes as if seeing our pain for the first time. "You're free," he said quietly. "No one will ever own you again." But he didn't stop there. Over the next days, as Lila recovered under Clara's care, Elias sent word to the law, real law, bringing witnesses, evidence, and surviving victims from other towns. What followed was the largest takedown of a trafficking ring the West had seen. It took weeks, countless hours, and more courage than I could measure, but in the end, every man involved was arrested or run out of the territory. And it all began with one rancher who refused to walk away. We stayed with Elias and Clara through the trials. Lila survived, though she walked with a limp. Ada found her strength again. And as for me, well, I learned that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who kneel beside you in the dirt when everyone else sees you as a prize to be traded. Years later, when travelers asked how we survived, we told them the truth. We were the reward. Until the rancher changed everything. And if you want more stories like this, stories of courage, survival, and the true Wild West, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps these forgotten tales alive, and trust me, the next one will stay with you long after the sun sets behind the plains.